Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for my tardiness. Went over a little bit at work today. Um, so if we can begin, because this is going to definitely be a long meeting, or I hope, fingers crossed, it won't be, but it looks like it's going to be a long meeting. So Ms. Seward, will you take over?
Sure, I sure will, no problem.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So let's start our presentation for our December 1st Policy Committee meeting. And I'm trying to change my view here so I don't have so many things blocking me. Okay, so for today's, come on, computer. All righty, so today we're going to be discussing three policies. Policy 200, enrollment in district, policy 202, eligibility of non-resident students, and policy 011, principles of governance and leadership. This particular number 3 is unique for the board itself. So as we always ground our work in purpose, I'm not going to read the slide, but it is something that's near and dear to all of our hearts during our policy review. And so for policy 200, if you recall, we did review this policy in November. However, when PSBA printed or distributed their newsletter, wouldn't you know it, policy 200 was in there with additional language.
Oh,
Yeah, oh, the joy. So since we had already reviewed it, and we already talked about these questions here, I put in green the new stuff. So, and the essence of the edits that were added by PSBA were this language around experiencing homelessness, foster care, and other forms of educational instability. So overall, in any enrollment policies, they wanted to add that language around McKinney-Vento eligible students, which would be homeless, foster care, or any other forms of educational instability. So that language was added to this policy. Any questions about that? It's pretty straightforward. No? Okay, moving on. And then there was one more place. This delegation of responsibility language was added, that the superintendent or designee shall annually notify students, parents, and guardians about the enrollment policy by publishing the policy in the student handbook, newsletters, and district website and other efficient methods. And that we shall develop and disseminate administrative regulations for enrollment of eligible students in the district. This we do through our registration department, which is their website is very robust about how we enroll students, and it is aligned with the Pennsylvania Department of Education's Enrollment Basic Education Circular. In fact, we took the language directly from the Pennsylvania, from the BEC is what it's called. And that language, as you bear with me, is right here in blue. That's the language that I had added to this policy, and that is also on our website. So any questions about that? This one was a pretty easy one. I wanted to make sure I gave room though for thought or conversation around it. Any? Sounds like we're cool. All righty, moving on. All right, so next I'm gonna go to this new one that they shared with us, eligibility of non-resident students. And if you recall, in our last meeting, we did talk about non-resident students. So this is a perfect opportunity to talk about this with this new policy that PSBA updated. So the language was shortened and updated. Corrections to inaccurate language that were previously in the old policy, basically because there were updates to the language for non-resident students just overall, and expanding the requirements for immediate admittance to include students in same language that we just talked about. So I'm going to go here. So they shortened this first part, and I'm sorry, is everybody okay with seeing this? I'll zoom it out a little bit bigger if it's easier for folks. So here they shortened it and just have this one sentence for purpose. These items here where they talk about a notarized sworn statement of residency and gratis, that's further down in the guidelines. So they expanded it out in the guidelines and took it out of this paragraph here. Any questions about purpose before I move on? Okay, hearing none. And just also notice the last time this policy was updated was 2007. So you can imagine there's been, this is an updated language of the policy for 2022. Authority, so they added language here that talked about that's sworn statement that we took out up at the top. It's just expanded the language to provide clarity so that so that people would be able to understand it better. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm going to give you a second to kind of look it over. And does anybody have any questions about this? Just going to give you a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds to kind of peruse it. Okay. All righty. So I'm going to move on. And then they took out this language again, that same language that was at the top was down here as well. I'm not sure why, it was just repeated. Then I'll continue on with the guidelines. Now here there were small edits of terminology and language. So instead of inmates, they said residents. Soften the language, basically. Any child that is an inmate, they soften the language, living in or assigned to a facility or institution. Here they added the student. And then here again, they added that language around educational instability, expanding again the language around McKinney-Vento. So that's the changes to this section.
Before we move on to the next section, I just want to just be clear on my end. And I meant to talk to you about it before the meeting, but I figured I might as well just go ahead and bring it up so that everybody knows. I know Delaware County does not have institutions for juveniles. So in our instance, for our school district, how are we proceeding with children that, scholars that are in our district, but are going to other facilities out of the county?
So those would be like approved private placements. Are those the type of students you're thinking of?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Oh, okay. Well, we do have those. I mean,
Okay.
we do have those. We do have some young people that, yes, are of our district, but they do attend other facilities that are not inside of our district. And for whatever jurisdiction those facilities are in, those students are considered non-resident students for that LEA or local educational agency. For example, if one of our kids is in a facility in Philadelphia, Philadelphia's non-resident policy would apply to that child, but they wouldn't apply to ours because so the vice versa would happen for us. If we had a facility here that a Philadelphia child was living in, they would fall under this clause.
Okay. Are we spending more money when we have our scholars assigned to another facility, or is it still the same? I guess fee for service, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Well, that's not my area of expertise, but I can
Okay.
find out because I don't want to speak incorrectly.
Okay.
All right. And unless Dr. Biko, you want to jump in or add anything? Nope. Okay.
No, ma'am.
All righty, cool. But I'll note the question.
I'm just being nosy. It's really not of any importance, only because, again, like I said, we don't have facilities that will house students. What is our policy and I don't remember reading anything regarding, housing students outside of the not the district, and I shouldn't keep saying district, but outside of our county, and then how does that affect us cost-wise? I was just curious.
All righty. Ivy, and then, okay, I'm just noting your question. Any other questions?
Does,
Okay.
does this policy talk about students of staff? As we discussed before, is that a different policy?
No, this one doesn't talk about
Yeah, this
students
one-
or staff, so are you
It's a
speaking?
different policy. That's the
Mhm.
answer to your question. Yes, it is a different policy.
Mhm.
All righty. Any other questions? Okie dokie, hearing none. This policy still talks about former students. The language hasn't changed. Does anybody have any questions or issues around this language? Nope. Okay. Give me another second to kind of review. All righty. Hearing none. Okay, I'll move on. Dependency or guardianship, that's the same. Tuition students, our district still does accept tuition students. And it is the cost of which is dictated by policy 207, which is tuition income.
607.
I'm sorry, 607, sorry. And then children permitted to attend tuition free under special circumstances. So we have two such cases, which are dual residency. And that's pretty self-explanatory. If two parents who live in two different counties and it's truly 50-50 split, they can choose which jurisdiction to go to. And then residents who keep and support children of school age. Gratis. And here you see the proof of residency, which is the same. It is the same. Wait a minute. Okay. And here is where there were changes. So when I will probably have to bring this down, I'm sorry, but I have to be able to see the note over here. So when I was reviewing this one, I noticed that the language here was outdated. This is the new language. So when I looked at the back, basically, there's guidelines for reasonable information for gratis. So you see here the signature and resident. Signer is a resident of the district. So this is when I, as a parent, am saying, Ms. Hopkins, I need you to take Scotty and he's going to live with you and I'm going to go somewhere else. But that happens sometimes. Child lives with a family member. And so then Ms. Hopkins says, I got to enroll Scotty in the district. And so Ms. Hopkins will come and take this information to registration and show that she now has been given, authority over my son Scotty. And so here you'll notice Signer is supporting the child gratis. And these are the pieces of information that she could show, right? So when I looked at ours, we had outdated language in there. So to align it with the updated guidelines from the Department of Ed, I took out what was here and put what is directly in that document. And so this last one, sworn statement by resident, that is the document that we have, which is our residency affidavit. So I just wanted to provide some background and some explanation for this language. Does anybody have any questions?
Danielle, can you just go back up a little bit? The policy you referenced there, I got you, is actually what we received from the not PSBA. Or is it from PSBA? I guess that's what I was trying to figure out when you clicked on this document. Who is that?
Let me show you exactly where it came from. Education enrollment back. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, good.
So it's under that.
So this is
okay.
the enrollment back, right? And so when I scroll down here, this is the enrollment back. See, there's that language around enrollment. So there are different rules around what you can ask for and not ask for, and disciplinary records, the whole shebang, what you can't ask for. And here we go with so you got like resident, that you have a court order, and
I'm
here's
good.
that language around and so that attachment that I went to, that legal documentation that shows dependency, that's where that document came from.
What does BEC stand for?
Basic Education Circular.
Thank you.
It's like the Bible of enrollment, basically.
I could tell you were showing us your whole Google search.
Yeah, well, you know, I literally memorized this document. It's like my bread and butter. So it's like my baby. So
And is this also relative to, I know we've had some communication with a lady from the State Department who gave us some guidance on enrollment documents and what really should be asked for, et cetera. So is this also related to that item as well?
sort of. So what she
And I'm not saying
wanted us to,
specifically to what she asked, but this is the area she was telling us to reference in terms of where to get
yep,
the information that's related to enrollment and what we should be asking for.
you are exactly right, sir.
Okay, all right, I'm good. Thank you.
All righty. So any more questions about this? Okay, moving on. And then the other language. Okay, so in the new policy that the PSBA provided, this language is not in there. So it is, I wanted to provide you with the opportunity to decide to keep, change, or delete this language. From my professional opinion, it doesn't hurt to have it in there. It basically is like your disclaimer. Any thoughts around this language?
Danielle, can you enlarge it just a little bit?
Oh,
please?
absolutely, yeah. Is that better?
Thank you.
Okay. So this is like our disclaimer.
I would recommend that we maintain this language.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Hearing none. I mean, I agree with you. I think it makes sense to keep it in.
Mhm.
Okay, and then we have delegation of responsibility. Again, this language is not in the new policy, but again, wanted to give you the opportunity to be able to decide keep or remove or edit.
Oh, I think when I read this, I think I was thinking more on the, okay, delegation of responsibility. And, correct me if I'm wrong, I was thinking that in this language, if it's not in the BEC or in regulations from PSBA, I was thinking that it should have indication of, right now I'm drawing a blank on Mr. Keith's position or in that department or something. It says designee, but it should also, and I'm not sure about the superintendent's responsibility with this. I think it should be your department with Mr. Keith's responsibility in that language. And Dr. Bicos, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my thought, was if this is not part of their language and we're going to keep this, then we should designate it to the proper, I guess, authorities is the word I'm looking for. I don't know.
Let me
Well,
provide
I would-
clarity. I'm sorry, this part is actually specifically talking about a student that, or a parent that comes to us that doesn't live within our boundaries, that's saying, I want to come to your school and I will pay tuition. This is for, I will pay tuition. And it basically says the superintendent or designee will develop rules around tuition-based students. And these are like the 5 parameters around how we would make the decision around enrolling somebody who doesn't live here. We know they don't live here, but they are willing to pay tuition.
So Joy, to go to your question about adding something, I think in every policy, it always states right now, the superintendent or designee. I do not believe that we specify a position in terms of who has the responsibility. All of these policies say the superintendent or designee. It does fall within the offices or it does fall within the student services arena. And that,
Right, and I agree with you on that. I do, especially
Okay.
the ones from PSBA, but I was saying that this wasn't part of PSBA's language. This was something that we had and we were keeping, and then I guess I kind of got, I misunderstood about what part of this was coming from. So, then I'm still going to be in the process of thinking that it should be a different responsibility of the student services department versus, I mean, again, if this is our language, then I think we need to really not call it a designee because it's actually the Department of Student Services.
Okay, so are you suggesting that we have the Department of Student Services shall develop procedures explicitly?
I move that.
Move. Lord.
No, yeah, that was my thought process, and again, people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm like I said, we're not using PSBA's language. This is
Right.
of our own. So I was thinking more on the lines of whose department is this responsibility.
right.
And-
And I think,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go
No,
ahead.
I just think that it should say the superintendent because ultimately the superintendent is the person that's responsible. It is not the Office of Student Services. So if the board has a concern or issue with something that is written, produced, or whatever, the
Mhm.
board is going to work with the superintendent. And so I think, I mean, every policy we have, regardless of where it comes from, all of them have, and I think it's the appropriate language, the superintendent or designee. So the superintendent ultimately has the responsibility. Now, if he or she assigns it to someone else, that's fine. So I would not take it out. If anything, you may, if you want to specify who the designee is, because what it says to me is that the Student Services Office could go and do something and the superintendent not necessarily be a part of the equation.
And I was looking at it more of who's responsible. So like, just like you said, and I'm going to use me, I'm not going to use anyone else. If I have a problem with, and I know XYZ student isn't in our district, and again, I misread this, so I didn't understand about the tuition part. So if they come in our district, then who's responsible for, developing what those procedures are? And, now that you're saying it, and now that I'm talking out loud now versus just reading, yes, I can see that being your responsibility ultimately, but then we're still talking about the procedures for that enrollment of the non-resident student is coming from not a designee, because you're not going to designate in just any old body, but it comes from that student services department.
And then I
I
would
think
also like
I
to,
think you can update that first line. I'm looking at the statement under number 5, because it says the superintendent shall recommend. So
yes.
as long as that's there, I'm fine. Because I'm
Yeah,
not
and-
going to recommend, as long as I'm sitting in the seat, I'm not going to recommend something that I haven't read, reviewed, or whatever, regardless of who develops it. So I'm
Right.
fine with that.
And that's exactly what I wanted to point out. In this particular, this is a really specific situation that if somebody from Philadelphia came and said, I will pay tuition. So if they came to the registration department, we would take this to the superintendent, because here we know the superintendent is the only one who can recommend to the board the approval to admit a person who is saying, I don't live here, I'll pay tuition. He has to bring that before the board. That's what this statement says here. So procedurally, that's how we would handle it. And then the additional condition under here says that the board wouldn't be responsible for transportation if it was approved, and the tuition rates. Now, here I did have to say this is wrong. So this language says the tuition rates shall be determined in coordinates with district established rates, and that's not true. It's actually the state that determines what the tuition rate is. So it says if it should say non-resident students attending school in the district shall be charged tuition in accordance with school code. And it says tuition rates shall be determined annually for non-resident students. And that actually is the language directly from policy 607, which I referred to up at the top. Any questions about that?
Mhm.
Okie dokie. Well, that's actually the end of this policy. So does anybody have any other questions? Okie dokie. Hearing none, I'm gonna go back to my presentation. Oh, we had a lot open up, didn't we? And so this last one, and Ms. Hopkins, I'm gonna ask the tag team with you on this one, because this particular one really is board focused. So as you can read on the slide, this was again provided to us by PSBA. And I took this actually directly from the newsletter, where they shared that PSBA's governing board approved this language. I have almost got it. October 30th, and at PSBA, this is language from their thing saying, if we encourage you to, adopt this during your reorganization meeting in December. So I shared this with Ms. Hopkins, and she said, hey, let's go for it. Let's review it. So that's what we're doing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The policy we're looking at on the screen is the 2016 one.
And I put the edits from the 2022 embedded in here so that you could see your language next to their language.
So the blue is new.
The blue is
It
new.
was new. Mhm.
And the red strike through is what you had. And I struck through it because they put new language. So you could see kind of what you had and what they gave you. So for example, I mean, a lot of this is like little language changes. Like they said, they took the off and said, just started with our. And they added this as elected and appointed board members instead of taken by the board. So it's like it's style changes and language changes. So therefore we pledge instead of, the language that was here. So because this is unique to the board, I really wanted to, hear your voice on this. I'll expand it so that it's easier for you to read and see. Any questions or issues with this part? Okay, so the first area is advocate earnestly. And so you'll see again, style changes. Instead of democracy, our commonwealth. Instead of legislative bodies, they said officials. So just kind of read it and make sure you're comfortable with the language. Same thing with lead responsibly. They kind of changed around the language for that second bullet there. Give you a second to look at it. Same thing with the last bullet. Okie dokie. Hearing none. Govern effectively, I'm sorry. Second bullet, they added the word routinely. And the third bullet, they kind of totally reworked. Where they were a little bit more explicit, where we had aligned decisions to policy. They said align board decisions to policy, ensuring compliance with PA school code, etc. And they completely eliminated the last two bullets. Because that language is kind of embedded throughout. Any issues, questions? All right, hearing none. Plan thoughtfully. So they took out this first part and just added strategic. And then that last bullet, that's where you see that allocating resources to effectively impact student success. So it kind of referred to the stuff that they eliminated in the section before. Mhm. And then evaluate continuously. There's some editing that happened there. So they just totally took out the first part and just said, make informed decisions. And then the second one was a total rewrite. Evaluate the superintendent annually. They just simplified the language.
The only thing about that particular one, I was like, okay, so they took out assessing student growth and achievement and then put I mean, it's like they took out one to talk about another. I mean, it had nothing to do, the conduct of the board and our self-assessment has nothing to do with growth and achievement. So I was wondering, since we were using our own language in the other policy, are we able to maintain that one? Because I think that is very imperative, especially when we're talking about the superintendent evaluation. Can we maintain that line?
We can. It is up to you. There's nothing that says we can't.
Which line is it? Are you saying?
The one
This one
she's
right
highlighting
here.
now,
Student growth
assess
and
student
achievement?
growth and achievement. And they crossed that out and put conduct a board self-assessment.
So they took
It
it
has
out.
nothing to do with the student growth and achievement.
So are
And
we
I-
sure
like I
that
s-
it's not something further down that captures that?
I don't-
And I wasn't saying go down there. I think we should.
No, I'm
just go
trying to look
through it.
myself to make sure
I
I'm.
gotcha.
And I don't
I'm-
recall anything saying about, again, like I said, when we evaluating, and it talks about this evaluating the superintendent annually, but it doesn't specifically talking about, and that's what I know for me personally as a board, I'm monitoring that as well, is, our growth and our achievement, especially now that we have the
You
strategic plan.
You could even make it evaluate student growth and achievement, evaluate board via self-assessment on a regular basis. So we stay in, like, because that
Yeah.
head is evaluate continuously, right? So you could,
Comprehensive and. Yeah, okay, so actually, maybe, okay, because it's review effectiveness of all comprehensive comprehensive plans. I was trying to figure out if this student growth language could go down here, because here it's saying review effectiveness of all comprehensive plans, and it should have an S at the end, and strategic plans. And then we could add and assess student growth achievement.
And to me, I think that's redundant, because if you're reviewing the effectiveness of comprehensive plans and strategic plans, that includes assessing student growth and achievement.
And that's probably why they took it out, probably, because that's encompassed here.
Okay.
So Ms. Hopkins, are you saying we should say it explicitly?
Before I answer, what did you say, Ms. Hopper? You talking to us?
no, she just got to HO and I answered.
No.
I think adding what she suggested, and Dr. Picos has a valid point. If we're reviewing comprehensive plans, then we are looking at student growth and achievement, although maybe we want, if you as chair want to be a little bit more intentional
Mhm.
Because not everybody's gonna know reviewing comprehensive plans means you're looking at student growth and achievement, right?
Right, and I agree with you on that, because even though our strategic plan now is focused on that, who's to say, and because ain't going nowhere, but so just in case, he, he decides that he wants to go somewhere and we get another one and that's not their focus, we're losing that line. Like, I'm just
Yeah,
forward
that's
thinking.
up to you, yeah.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me show you what it would look like. And
No,
did it-
I would not use the word and, I would use the word which includes.
oh, okay. All right.
Blah, 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 blah.
How we like that?
Thank you.
Everybody else all right with that? We're gonna add the, because this is the actual sentence. Okay, review the effectiveness of all comprehensive plans. Fix that. Comprehensive plans and strategic plans, which includes student growth and achievement. Is that data? Student growth and achievement data?
No, I think
It's just
achievement is
student growth
fine.
and achievement.
Yeah. that's
Okay.
fine.
You need a word.
Okie dokie. Sounds good to me. All righty. And communicate clearly.
Yeah,
Stop it. So they removed the second and third and fourth. So wait a minute. So they just rewrote them. It was really strange how they did it. So this one is encourage input and support district from school community. They did take that one out, and they replaced it with acknowledge and listen to varied input from all stakeholders, which basically says the same thing.
mhm.
Protect confidentiality. They expanded that and said promote transparency while protecting necessary confidential matters. So, and then the last one, honor the sanctity of executive session. You see what they wrote, set expectations and guidelines for individual board member communication. Any questions about communicating clearly?
No, I sort of think executive session needs to be in there just so citizens understand, but I defer to the chair.
We had a huge discussion at one of the workshops regarding, and then maybe that's probably why they took the executive session out, because of, I think there's 2 lawsuits that are going on, or went on rather, regarding executive sessions and how people are not professionally conducting themselves on the board. One person was a radio talk show host, and what was said in executive session went on his talk show. And
Oh.
and he told every aspect of what took place at executive session, and he did it continuously, even though he was asked to stop. And he didn't stop. He said that it was the right of the community to know what was going on behind closed doors. They sued him. He countersued, and the judge actually agreed with him.
So that makes sense why they would say set expectations and guidelines for individual board member communication.
Mhm,
That makes sense.
mhm.
Now that you gave that context, that totally makes sense to me.
Right.
Okay. Wow, I did not know that. Any other questions, issues with this part? And the last one is act ethically. So there you go. And they actually added, wait. Is that when boys made the decision is time? Oh, you know what? This should be in blue. I'm sorry. This should be in blue. That was me editing quickly. They added one. Does not possess any authority. So now that you gave me that context, I totally understand why they changed this language now.
Mhm.
That makes, I see it right there. It makes sense. Except that the board has made a decision. It's time to move forward collectively and constructively.
I didn't think they were gonna move that fast because of, again, like the workshop. And I'm sure they reviewed all the video from the different workshops and these were things that came up.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Yeah.
now I totally understand it now. Now that I see the, the language, I'm like, yep, I see it.
Mhm.
So this is the last part here,
Okay.
and that's it.
Yeah, I wanted to review this one because
Mhm.
of us because of us conducting our trainings and our PD.
Mhm.
And these are the things that was discussed. So I wanted to make sure that this was part of the policy that we're discussing before we go to our next retreat.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, and that's all I got. That's it. Our next meeting will be January 5th, 2023. So I'll
Ooh.
stop my share and open up the opportunity for discussion and next steps, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I don't see any participants, so it's just us four. So anybody? All right, well, we good then. And so if we don't get any updated policies from PSBA, and I'm sure, no, because this is the holiday, so they might be quiet till February.
They might be,
Um,
but I do want to note that there were 9 policies that were included in that newsletter. Some of them had minor updates, like they were reference changes, like instead of policy or referencing policy 1, we're referencing policy 2. There were no substantive changes, but there were some that there were substantive changes and that are on our radar to look at. One of them is the uniforms. Another one is graduation requirements. So those will take a little bit more work, and I just could not prepare them quick enough because they just
Right.
released it. So
Right.
I just wanted to give you that note.
Right. Thank you, Miss Seward. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you
You're
for
very
keeping me on my toes, and
welcome.
I appreciate everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Yep, just like you, I love these policy stuff. Any more questions? Any comments? If not, if I don't see you, and I'm sure I will, I hope we have a holiday party and get together. Okay, I'm sorry, I digressed, and I forgot we're on camera, right? Listen, I hope everyone have a wonderful holiday season. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Hanukkah. No, Hanukkah. That's how you say it, right, Jennifer?
Mhm.
And
Happy birthday
happy birthday.
to me.
And
When's
oh,
your birthday?
when's your birthday?
December 28th.
Oh, I'm gonna miss it. So
Oh.
happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. Okay. Good night,
Thank you.
everybody. Love you all.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Take care.
Good night.
Be safe out there.
You too.